I noticed one of the other exhibitions today is the Medical Devices and Products Fair. So if any of you have strayed in here by mistake, I think you should stay because you might find a natural remedy for insomnia. We're going to discuss the pattern for the next hour or two, but hopefully we can make it interesting and make it exciting for you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. As Barry said, I'm the CEO of Horse Racing Ireland, which is the governing body of the sport in my country. The homepage of the website of the IFHA describes one of the fundamental aims of the Federation as being the organisation of competitions to select the best horses in order to improve the quality of breeding. This is considered such a fundamental and important issue that the very first article in the International Agreement on Racing and Breeding deals with the recognition and categorisation of quality races. I think every presentation I've ever given at an international forum has a slide of vintage crop, but I think it's important to say in the 21 years since vintage crop had its groundbreaking success in the Melbourne Cup, the racing and bloodstock business has truly become global. It is routine nowadays for horses to travel from one country to race in another, while stallions are regularly shuttled from the northern to southern hemisphere and vice versa. From my living room in Ireland, I can now watch racing every day from North America, South America, Australia and South Africa, as well as major races from Hong Kong and further afield. The world has indeed become a smaller place. In this new global framework, how do we identify the best horses and the best races that they race in? In Europe, this is done through the mechanism of the European pattern. This mechanism decides the schedule of major races in all member countries. I'd like to briefly explain to you today how this system works and where it is likely to go in the future. In order to look forward, we must first look back. And as with many things in our great sport, the origins of the pattern lie in Britain. In 1965, the UK Jockey Club established a committee chaired by the Duke of Norfolk to consider a system of structuring the most important contests in the racing calendar to ensure that a series of races was available for elite racehorses throughout the season. This work was then picked on by a second British committee, which was chaired by Lord Carnarvon in 1968, and that was charged with identifying specific races in both Britain and abroad which could provide tests for outstanding horses. Out of these discussions, the racing authorities of Britain, France and Ireland then worked out a system of races to allow a carefully structured and balanced competition between the racehorses of the three countries. This meant that in 1971, the European pattern was born. Initially, the pattern comprised Britain, France and Ireland, and then over the years, Italy, Germany, Scandinavia and Turkey joined as members. The aims of the European pattern are to provide a coordinated programme of quality races in each age, sex and distance category within the member countries. The committee aims to achieve a balance of group races within the European pattern so that there are more Group 3 races than Group 2 races and more Group 2 races than Group 1 races, and the total number of Group 3 races should exceed the total combined number of Group 1 and Group 2. This is described as a pyramid structure. Group 1 races consist of domestic classics and major international weight for age races. Group 2 races comprise races just below championship standard, and Group 3 comprise preparatory races such as classic trials. As I said earlier, the European Pattern Committee comprises 5 countries as full members. Those countries stage a total of 406 group races between them, and the breakdown is shown on the screen. A further 442 listed races are run in Europe, which carry black type with them as well. The Pattern Committee exercises strict quality control over European racing, and the introduction of any new pattern race or the upgrade of an existing one requires formal approval of the committee. In order to retain its status, any pattern race must meet strict criteria which are reviewed every year by the committee. In recent years, the European Pattern Committee has tightened its rules, and we've had more downgrades than upgrades. Next year, 46 races, including a number of Group 1 races, will be reviewed by the Pattern Committee. This represents more than 10% of all group races run in Europe. As the European Pattern Committee evolved over the years, in order to be able to measure the quality of the races in the pattern, the racing authorities of Britain, France and Ireland agreed to form a classifications committee. This consisted of the senior handicappers of each of these countries. Initially, these classifications were published for 3-year-olds and older horses only, but very quickly 2-year-olds were added, and over the years, a number of other countries were joined. And now this group comprises the representatives of 20 different countries in the world. I think this is the key development, really. We now have a handicappers group, a group of experts comprising 20 different countries around the world who rate horses on a consistent basis. A very significant development in the evolution of this group was in 2013, when the world-famous watchmaker Longines became the sponsor of the rankings. And these rankings are now published 10 times a year on a monthly basis starting in March. This means that, like other sports, racing now has a vehicle to promote its global rankings of its elite performers, just the same as you can see on the screen that we have for tennis, for golf, for Formula One. The most recent set of rankings, which were... Sorry. No, missing a slide. The most recent set of rankings, which were published last month, really serve to emphasize the global nature of our sport nowadays. The rankings, the horses ranking from 1 to 12 in the rankings came from 4 different continents. And that was before the major classic season started in Europe. In addition to identifying the best races in the world, the work of the grading committee in Europe and in other regions has a significant commercial dimension to it. That's because the grading of races determines the type of black type which horses carry under their pedigree in sales catalogues. That's a picture and the pedigree page of the most expensive horse ever sold in Ireland, Chiquita, who was sold at Goffs last year for €6 million. And as you can see, for breeding experts, what they look for not only is confirmation and racetrack performance, but the pedigree and the black type within the pedigree. That black type is determined by the rankings that the races which the horses run in have carried. Each year, the US Jockey Club publishes the International Cataloguing Standards Book in association with the IFHA. This is known as the Blue Book, and it's a vital piece of racing architecture. Just to be perverse, because I'm from Ireland, we show the Blue Book in white there on the slide. The standards and statistics are maintained by a committee known as IRPAC. That's the International Grading and Race Planning Committee of the IFHA, and they have the approval of CETA, which is the Society of International Thoroughbred Auctioneers. So you have racing authorities, you have auctioneers, and you have breeders associations sitting on IRPAC. It's chaired by my colleague Carl Hamilton, who's on the panel here today. The Blue Book is very important because it sets out a full listing for every year of stakes races worldwide. And that's a listing of races which will carry black type in sales catalogues. The listing of races can also have significant implications for whether a horse is qualified to run in certain races or not. In the current Blue Book, that slide is probably quite hard to read, but it shows that there was a total of 146,649 flat races run worldwide last year. Of those races, 4,889, or 3.3%, were black type races. And within that 4,889, 1,895, or 1.3%, were group or graded races. So 1.3% of races run in the world on the flat last year were group or graded races. The book then divides these races into 4 different categories. That determines the nature of the black type which is offered in sales catalogues. Since 1985, black type is only awarded to the first 3 finishers in graded or listed races. Before that, it was offered to fourth place. So if a race is in Part 1, the first 3 in that race will receive black type in a sales catalogue. The winners will receive uppercase black type. The placed horses will receive lowercase black type. And the group designator is shown after the black type. In Part 2, the first 3 receive black type, but there's no group designator shown. And Part 3 receive no black type at all. Part 4 relates to national hunt racing. Given that one of the main objectives of the IFHA is the selection of the best horses and the improvement of the breed, the system of quality control over the best races worldwide is very important. The IFHA has encouraged a regional approach to quality control. And at this point, IRPAC issues guidelines to racing authorities in different countries and regions to determine how races should be graded and where particular races should lie in the Blue Book. These guidelines require countries or regions to have a committee that oversees the group and graded races in that country, that all group or graded races must be open to international competition, fully open races, that each country or region must have a specific process to assess the quality of the races, be it a ratings process or some other qualitative process, that any upgrades must be justified by the quality of the runners, and that races not meeting the relevant quality must be downgraded. ERPAC recognises a number of regional authorities for determining group or graded status in Part 1 of the Blue Book. These are the European Pattern Race Committee, the American Graded Stakes Committee, the Jockey Club of Canada, the Asian Racing Federation, and the new OSAF Pattern Committee in South America. The last two committees review lists that are submitted by its member countries. Much progress has been made under this structure, and in a relatively short time, we have now moved to global world thoroughbred rankings. Countries such as Japan and Turkey have drastically reduced their pattern race program and made their racing more open to international competition in order to allow their races to move into Part 1 of the Blue Book. The book clearly sets out the criteria which countries must follow in order to upgrade their races from one part to another. As Bill said, one of the most positive developments in recent years has been the phased integration of South American racing into the handicappers group and the establishment of a South American race grading committee that met for the first time in November 2013. This now means that all the major racing countries and regions have established committees to oversee their elite races, and the best horses in those regions are now represented on the Longines World Thoroughbred rankings. Under the umbrella of ERPAC, a consistency has developed about identifying and maintaining the quality of the best races around the world. As I said previously, most countries use horses' ratings as the most common way of evaluating the status of group or graded races. That's not the only basis that is used. Countries also use other factors such as assessing the quality of the race overall, the prize money levels of the race, the black type performances of horses that have run in the race, the quality of all the runners in the race, not just the first three finishers, other black type races in the country, the field size that the race achieves, and the overall shape of the country's pattern. Now that we have a global set of rankings, and with the increased international nature of our business, some fundamental questions can now be considered. These are questions that are regularly thrown at us. The first question to consider is, are there too many black type races in the world? As the slide shows, I better put the slide up before I show it. The answer to that question, in my view, is no. Of the 146,000 flat races run last year, only 3.3% of them were black type races, and only 1.3% of them were graded races. This suggests that there are not too many group or graded races in the world, but the number of non-graded black type races, which is more than double the number of graded races, may need consideration. Second question is, how have the number of races moved in relation to the foal population and the number of races? This slide shows that in the last 31 years, the number of thoroughbred foals born worldwide has fallen by 12.6%, and the number of flat races has fallen by 6%. However, in the same period, despite a small drop in the last 10 years, the number of black type races has increased by almost 5%. Against a backdrop of a declining foal population worldwide and a declining number of races worldwide, it would be difficult to see any rationale for an increase in the worldwide black type program. A question which we often hear is whether the pattern can accommodate the commercial needs of racecourses, sponsors within the context of a structured program for the best horses. At times, the pattern system is accused of being inflexible, as acting as an obstacle to progress. I don't believe this is the case, and we must always remember that the pattern is a regulatory mechanism, so it should seek to be respected rather than popular. It's very encouraging in recent years to see an increased desire amongst race clubs worldwide to upgrade the standard and value of their races. And I believe that pattern systems worldwide have proven themselves capable of accommodating such requests while also ensuring that racing is developed in a structured fashion. In Europe, we've seen the development over the last 5 years of British Champions Day, British Future Champions Day, and Irish Champions Weekend. Together with the Arc de Triomphe meeting, these now give a fantastic finale to the European flat racing season, where there are 3 major meetings in 3 different countries within 5 weeks of each other. These meetings offer 18 high-value Group 1 races across all ages, distances and sexes. During this process, which I'll have to admit was not without its challenges, the European Pattern Committee was able to reconcile national priorities for each of its countries with the overall development of a strong pattern programme for the region. We've also seen in other regions the development of meetings such as the new championship meeting in Sydney and the addition of a second day to the Breeders' Cup meeting, successfully executed with the approval of the local Pattern and Grading Committee. The pattern must be flexible and it must reflect the constant change within our sport, particularly in light of globalisation. However, it must also place a high priority on its regulatory role to ensure sensible and structured development rather than the alternative, which is a free-for-all. One issue in Europe is that any change above Group 3 level, so a change to a Group 2 or a Group 1 race, requires unanimous approval, effectively giving a country a veto over any changes at that level. We're now debating whether that in fact is too strict and too restrictive, and whether it should be by majority vote in relation to changes to Group 2 and Group 1 races. Other areas in which the European pattern has shown itself to be flexible to change was the introduction 10 years ago of a new and much improved black type programme for older fillies and mares. The problem was that before that, Europe was lacking. Too many fillies were either being sent to race overseas or were being retired to stud at the end of their 3-year-old career. By changing the pattern and by offering appropriate opportunities, Europe now has a very strong programme for older fillies and mares, which has encouraged more owners to keep their horses in training. This year, the European Pattern Committee has identified its sprint programme as an area of weakness. And that's obvious to anyone looking at the world rankings in recent years, where the Australian and Far Eastern horses have generally topped the world rankings. There are a number of shortcomings in the black type programme for sprinters in Europe. Believe it or not, we do not have any sprint races for 3-year-olds in the early part of the season. So sprinters are required to race against older horses much earlier in their life or in their career than horses racing over longer distances. So while there's a programme over a mile and a quarter, a mile and a half for 3-year-olds only, there's nothing for sprinters. This has actually led to a trend in recent years in Europe where some top-class sprinting 2-year-olds have actually been retired to stud at the end of their 2-year-old career. Ireland has no sprint above Group 3 level, and there are only 6 Group 1 and 5 Group 2 sprint races throughout Europe all season. The European sprint pattern represents the strangest shaped pyramid you could imagine. I don't think the Faroes will be very proud of the work we've done. Ireland's leading sprinter, Soul Power, has remarkably had his last 21 races outside of Ireland. In fact, it's 22 now because he won at Newmarket on Saturday. And regularly on Prix de l'Arc Day, France's leading sprint, the Prix de l'Abbé, features only a handful of French sprinters. So pulling all this together, the Pattern Committee has realised that there's an area to develop, an area of weakness in the European programme, and we are currently carrying out an exceptional exercise to fundamentally review our sprint programme in Europe and hope to recommend changes to the racing authorities to ensure better quality sprinters can be put in training and retained in training in Europe. The committee would expect to conclude its work in this area by the middle of the year. Another question which is regularly asked is whether there are anomalies in the system whereby races may carry a particular grading in one region or country but would not merit the same grading in another region. That slide is worth reflecting on. It shows the number of graded races by country for 2014. So if you go down quickly down the slide, the number of Group 1 races throughout the world at 459 is spread between 40 in Argentina, 71 in Australia, 29 in Brazil, 4 in Canada, 17 in Chile, 27 in France, 33 in Britain, 7 in Germany, 6 in Hong Kong, 12 in Ireland, 6 in Italy, Japan has 23, New Zealand 22, Peru 9, South Africa 34, Singapore 2, and the United Arab Emirates 7. Without doubt, this points to significant anomalies which Bill alluded to earlier, and these will need to be addressed as global rankings and global quality control systems evolve. As a result of us having better information, we must now examine and address these anomalies. I'm pleased to say that all of the regions, including South America and part of the Asian Racing Federation, are committed to addressing these anomalies, as it's absolutely necessary to uphold the integrity of the race grading and sales cataloguing systems. To do otherwise would be grossly unfair to those countries such as Japan and Turkey that have already significantly reduced their programme. IRPAC is conscious that this will be difficult for some countries and some racecourses, and has therefore recommended a phased downgrading of underperforming races over the next 3 years. Another question to consider in this area is how big a factor is prize money in determining the quality of a race. Put on big prize money, you get the best race. That's not necessarily true. Using the new grading system, the IFHA now publishes annually a list of the top races in the world, and the final list for 2013 is shown on the attached slide. This list is done on the basis of the ratings of the first 4 finishers over a 3-year rolling average. And as you can see, I don't think Louis is here, but I don't want to upset him, the Kipco Champion Stakes at Ascot, which is run on British Champions Day, tops the rankings, due in no small measure to Frankel's presence in that race in 2012. The list shows that while prize money is undoubtedly very important in attracting the best horses, it is not the only factor. And while the Champion Stakes is the highest rated race in the world, it's not the most valuable race in the world, which is the Dubai World Cup, which ranks in 15th place. Final question, which Bill touched on earlier, is there a case for Super Group 1 races? From time to time we get asked this question, and it usually goes along the lines of, why is such and such a race given the same grading as the winner of the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe? Why don't we identify a subset of Group 1 races which reflect the absolute elite races worldwide? While that is understandable, it will create practical difficulties. The European Pattern Committee recently discussed the matter and concluded that rather than trying to create another new subset of races, the focus should be on the world's elite horses through heavily promoting and marketing the Longines World Best Racehorse Rankings and trying to achieve more equality worldwide in quality control systems. As you can see, from the most recent list of world rankings, it's clear nowadays that the best horse in the world can literally come from any part of the world. That's the rankings that were published at the end of March, and it's fantastic to see you have a Japanese horse just away leading the rankings from an American horse, Game On Dude, Military Attack, a local horse here in Hong Kong, fourth, followed by African Story, the Dubai World Cup winner, and Akid Mofid, another Hong Kong horse. That's before the main European and American classic seasons get going. So as I said, it's clear nowadays that the best horse in the world can come from any part of the world. So what conclusions can we draw from all of this? The first conclusion I would draw is that great progress has been made in this area in the last 40 years. The situation which we have now at the moment will be completely unrecognisable in the eyes of the Duke of Norfolk and the other architects of the European pattern. As always, the fact that progress has been made simply means that more work now needs to be done. The second conclusion I would draw is that globalisation is here. It's been here for some time. It's part of our day-to-day racing and breeding business, and all our systems, including our pattern systems and our sales cataloguing systems, need to reflect the global nature of our business. The third conclusion I would draw is that there are too many races in the world carrying a grading which would not be justified under a single global ranking system. And on a progressive basis, these will have to be downgraded or moved to different parts of the Blue Book. The fourth conclusion is that through the Longines World's Best Racehorse Rankings, racing now has a very powerful tool to market and to promote the stars of the sport on a global basis and to a new audience. Last year's top 3 horses in the rankings came from France, Australia, and the United States. And as I just said, the latest set of rankings feature a Japanese, an American, and a Hong Kong trained horse in the top 3, with the main European and American horses about to join. Our sport is global, and it now needs to be promoted globally. The final conclusion I would reach from the work which has been going on is, as the monthly world rankings become more widely promoted, these will place much greater focus and scrutiny on the rules under which races are run that contribute to these rankings. In particular, as Bill alluded to earlier, the rules relating to medication. It would be ridiculous to think that you would publish Formula One world rankings where you would allow the drivers some of the drivers to drive on diesel, some of the drivers to drive on unleaded fuel. Or you publish golf rankings where some golfers play 18 holes around, other golfers play 17 holes around. I believe the IFHA must move to a single worldwide set of rules relating to medication, and we simply must find a way of ensuring that these rules can be enforced in all member countries. I realise this is not straightforward in some countries, but in order for there to be value and integrity in our global rankings and our black type system in our sales catalogues, it is simply where we must go. Without doubt, we face many challenges, but with challenges become opportunities, and the developments of global rankings and race grading systems provide a wonderful opportunity for us to promote our sport to a new global audience. Thank you.